Not every thought deserves a voice. And this one line, if you truly understand it, can save you from years of pain, regret, and broken relationships. You see, the biggest mistake most of us make is believing that just because a thought comes into our mind, it must come out of our mouth. As if silence is a crime, as if holding back means we are weak, afraid, or losing. But in reality, the mind is like a busy street. Thousands of thoughts pass by every single day. If you tried to stop every car and talk to every driver, you would go mad. Yet that is exactly what we do with our thoughts. We entertain them, trust them, and speak them without filtering. Here is the truth. No one teaches us early in life. The mind produces thoughts, but wisdom decides which ones deserve expression. Every thought is not a command. Every emotion is not an instruction. Some thoughts are simply noise. Some are born out of insecurity. Some are created by ego. Some come from anger, jealousy, fear, or past wounds. And when we give these thoughts a voice, we give them power over our life. Think about how many times you said something and immediately thought, I shouldn't have said that. The damage was done in seconds, but the regret stayed for months, sometimes years. One careless sentence can undo years of trust. One emotional reaction can destroy a relationship that took decades to build. And later, when the moment has passed and the emotions have cooled down, we realize the thought was temporary, but the consequences were permanent. The problem is not that we think too much. The problem is that we speak too fast. There is no pause between thought and speech. No space to ask, is this necessary? Is this kind? Is this the right moment? Instead, we let emotions grab the microphone and start performing on stage, while wisdom sits silently in the audience, watching the damage unfold. Silence in such moments is not suppression. Silence is filtration. Just like we filter water before drinking it, we must filter thoughts before speaking them. Because unfiltered water can make us sick, and unfiltered words can make our life bitter. Holding back a thought does not mean denying your feelings. It simply means you respect yourself and others enough to choose the right time, tone, and intention. There is also a strange illusion. We live with the idea that speaking our mind will make us feel lighter. Sometimes it does, but very often it makes us heavier. We feel relieved for 5 minutes, and then the guilt, tension, and consequences start piling up. True relief does not come from saying everything. It comes from understanding yourself deeply enough that you don't need to say everything. Wise people understand this secret early. They know that silence is not emptiness, it is strength under control. When you don't react immediately, you are telling the world, I am bigger than this moment. You are choosing long-term peace over short-term satisfaction. You are choosing maturity over impulse. Observe people who are truly respected. They don't speak much, but when they do, people listen. Their words carry weight because they are rare, considered, and intentional. On the other hand, people who speak constantly slowly lose the value of their words. When everything is said, nothing is special. Not every thought deserves a voice, because not every battle deserves your energy. Some thoughts want you to defend yourself, prove yourself, or attack someone who triggered your ego. But when you stay quiet, you deny these thoughts the victory they seek. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to correct everyone. You don't need to react to every comment, message, or opinion. Your peace is more important than your pride. And remember this, the loudest arguments often come from the weakest control. The strongest people don't rush to speak, they pause. That pause is where growth happens. That pause is where wisdom steps in and says, let it go. This is not worth it. When you start practicing this, life changes slowly but deeply. Relationships improve because there are fewer unnecessary conflicts. Your mind becomes calmer because it is no longer constantly performing. You gain self because you know you are in control of your words, not the other way around. So the next time a thought rises in your mind, don't ask, can I say this? Ask, should I say this? And then ask an even more powerful question, what will this cost me if I do? Because silence, when chosen consciously, is not losing your voice. It is finding your power. Silence is a response, and many times it is the most powerful response you can ever give. We grow up believing that if someone says something, we must reply. If someone provokes us, we must defend ourselves. If someone misunderstands us, we must immediately clarify. But life slowly teaches us a deeper lesson. Reacting to everything does not make you strong, it makes you exhausted. Not every situation requires your explanation, your justification, or your emotional energy. There are moments when words don't heal, they only fuel the fire. When emotions are high, logic is low. In such moments, silence becomes a shield. It protects you from saying things you will later regret and from becoming a version of yourself you don't even like. Silence gives you distance, and distance gives you clarity. When you choose not to respond, it doesn't mean you agree. It doesn't mean you are weak. It means you are wise enough to know that some conversations lead nowhere. Some arguments are not meant to be won, they are meant to be avoided. Because even if you win the argument, you often lose peace, dignity, or a relationship. Think about arguments you have witnessed or experienced. Most of them don't end because one person suddenly understands the other. They end because someone gets tired, someone walks away, someone chooses silence. That silence is not defeat, it is emotional intelligence at work. It is knowing when to stop feeding a situation that only grows uglier with every word. Silence is a response because it communicates something very clear. I am not available for this energy. It tells the other person that you refuse to engage in drama, negativity, or disrespect. And interestingly, silence often says more than words ever could. When you don't respond, people are forced to sit with their own words. They hear themselves. They feel the weight of what they said. Words can be twisted, misunderstood, or used against you. Silence cannot. Silence leaves no evidence to be misquoted, no statement to be taken out of context. That is why calm people often appear mysterious and powerful. They are not rushing to explain themselves, and that unsettles people who thrive on reaction. There is also a deep internal shift that happens when you start using silence consciously. You stop living in reaction mode. Your mood is no longer controlled by what others say or do. You reclaim ownership of your emotions. Instead of handing over the remote control of your peace to everyone around you, you take it back. Silence also gives you time to observe, time to understand intentions, time to see patterns. Many people reveal their true nature when you stop responding. When there is no reaction, masks fall. manipulation fails, ego becomes visible, and suddenly you see the situation much more clearly than you ever could while arguing. In relationships, silence can be a form of respect. It allows space instead of suffocation. It prevents small misunderstandings from turning into lifelong wounds. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is pause the conversation, not continue it. Silence allows emotions to cool down so that when words return, they come from understanding, not anger. In professional life, silence can save careers. Speaking impulsively in meetings, emails, or messages has destroyed more opportunities than lack of talent ever did. When you don't immediately react, you appear composed, confident, and mature. People trust those who are not easily shaken. Of course, silence is not about avoiding every difficult conversation. It is about choosing the right moment. There is a difference between conscious silence and fearful silence. Conscious silence comes from strength. Fearful silence comes from insecurity. The goal is not to never speak, but to speak from clarity rather than chaos. The more you practice this, the more you realize how freeing it is. You don't carry the burden of every unnecessary exchange. You don't replay arguments in your mind at night. Your inner world becomes quieter, and in that quietness, you start hearing your own wisdom. Silence is a response because it reflects self-respect. It says, I value my peace more than proving a point. It says, I trust myself enough to not react immediately. And often, it invites the other person to rise to a higher level too. So the next time you feel the urge to reply instantly, pause. Breathe. Let the moment pass. Let silence do its work. You will notice something powerful. When you stop reacting, life stops controlling you. And that is when silence becomes not just a response, but a strategy for a peaceful, powerful life. Ego speaks loud, intelligence listens first. And this single truth can change the way you handle people, conflict, and even success in your life. The ego has a very strong urge to be seen, to be heard, and to be validated. It wants attention immediately. It doesn't care about timing, consequences, or long-term impact. When the ego is triggered, it reacts instantly, it interrupts, it argues, it raises its voice. It wants to win, even if winning costs peace, relationships, or self-respect. Intelligence, on the other hand, moves differently. It pauses, it observes, it listens. It understands before it responds. Have you noticed that the moment someone feels insulted, misunderstood, or challenged, their volume increases? Words become sharper. Tone becomes aggressive. The need to prove oneself becomes urgent. That is ego at work. Ego is insecure by nature, so it tries to cover that insecurity with noise. The louder it gets, the more fragile it actually is. Intelligence doesn't need to shout because it is not afraid of being questioned. A secure mind does not panic when someone disagrees. It becomes curious. It listens to understand, not to attack. It knows that real strength is not in overpowering someone with words, but in remaining calm when emotions are pulling you in every direction. Listening first is not submission, it is strategy. When you listen, you gather information. You understand the other person's mindset, emotions, and intentions. You see where they are coming from. And when you finally speak, your words land with precision. Ego speaks blindly. Intelligence speaks intentionally. Most conflicts in life are not caused by bad intentions, but by poor listening. We listen to reply, not to understand. While the other person is still speaking, we are already preparing our defense. In our head, we miss half the message because our ego is busy protecting its image. And then we respond to what we assumed, not to what was actually said. Intelligence breaks this pattern. It allows silence to exist in conversation. It allows the other person to finish. It absorbs the full picture before reacting. This is why wise people often ask questions instead of giving instant answers. Questions calm situations. Ego-driven statements escalate them. There is also a deep confidence in listening. When you listen calmly, you signal that you are not threatened. You don't feel the need to dominate the conversation. You are comfortable enough to let someone else express themselves fully. This creates respect. People feel heard around you, and when people feel heard, they become less defensive. In leadership, this quality is priceless. Leaders who listen build trust. Leaders who constantly talk create distance. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most influential one. Influence comes from presence, not volume. People follow those who understand them, not those who overpower them. Ego wants the last word. Intelligence wants the right outcome. Sometimes the right outcome requires silence. Sometimes it requires a gentle response. Sometimes it requires walking away. Ego sees walking away as weakness. Intelligence sees it as wisdom. It understands that energy is limited and must be invested wisely. Listening first also protects you from manipulation. When you speak too quickly, you reveal your emotions and intentions. When you listen, you stay grounded. You see through exaggeration, provocation, and emotional traps. You respond from a place of awareness rather than impulse. This does not mean intelligence never speaks strongly. It does, but when it does, it is firm, clear, and controlled. There is no unnecessary aggression. There is no emotional leakage. The words are backed by calm conviction, not by insecurity. The more you practice listening, the more you realize how much you were missing before. You notice patterns in people's behavior. You understand situations more deeply. You start responding instead of reacting. And slowly, your life becomes less chaotic and more intentional. Ego-driven reactions feel satisfying in the moment, but they age badly. Intelligent responses may feel uncomfortable at first, but they age beautifully. Over time, they build respect, trust, and inner peace. So the next time you feel the urge to interrupt, correct, or prove yourself, pause. Listen. Let the ego settle down. Give intelligence the space to step forward. Because when ego speaks loud, it reveals insecurity. And when intelligence listens first, it reveals true strength. Reactions create regrets. And almost every deep regret in life has the same origin. A moment where emotion spoke faster than wisdom. A reaction is instant. It doesn't ask permission from logic or patience. It bursts out when anger is triggered, when ego feels threatened, or when fear takes control. In that moment, it feels justified. It feels necessary. It feels like if you don't say something right now, you will lose something important. But what we don't realize is that reactions don't solve problems, they multiply them. Think about the times you reacted emotionally. Maybe you raised your voice, sent a message you shouldn't have, said something harsh, or made a decision in anger. In that moment, it felt like relief. You expressed yourself. You released the pressure. But later, when the emotions settled, the regret arrived quietly and stayed longer than the emotion ever did. The moment passed, but the damage remained. Reactions are powerful because they are honest, but honesty without awareness can be destructive. Not every honest feeling needs immediate expression. Some feelings need time to be understood before they are communicated. When we react, we skip that process. We allow emotion to drive the vehicle while wisdom is locked in the trunk. Most reactions come from unhealed parts of us. A small comment hurts us deeply because it touches an old wound. A simple disagreement feels like disrespect because it challenges our identity. And instead of responding to the present situation, we react from past pain. That is why reactions are often disproportionate. The situation was small, but the response was huge. A pause changes everything. Even a few seconds between feeling and speaking can prevent lifelong regret. In that pause, you give yourself a chance to ask, what will happen if I say this? That single question has the power to stop emotional damage before it starts. People often say, this is just how I am. I speak my mind. But speaking your mind without control is not authenticity, it is impulsiveness. True strength is being able to feel deeply and still choose wisely. Self-control is not suppression, it is direction. Reactions also cost us respect. When people see you react emotionally again and again, they stop taking you seriously. Your words lose weight. Your presence loses calm. But when you respond thoughtfully, even silence earns you respect. People begin to see you as stable, mature, and trustworthy. In relationships, reactions are especially dangerous. One angry sentence can echo for years. Words spoken in heat are rarely forgotten. Apologies help, but they don't erase memory. That is why emotional intelligence matters more than emotional expression. Love doesn't need constant honesty, it needs safety. In professional life, reactions can be career-ending. One emotional email, one careless comment, one public outburst can undo years of hard work. Talent may open doors, but composure keeps them open. The people who rise are not always the most skilled, they are the most controlled under pressure. Regret is a heavy emotion. It drains energy, it creates overthinking, it keeps replaying the past in your mind, asking, what if I had stayed quiet? And the painful part is knowing that the regret was avoidable. All it needed was a pause. Responding instead of reacting is a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires awareness. It requires humility. It requires choosing long-term peace over short-term satisfaction. It requires reminding yourself that no moment is worth losing your values. When you stop reacting, you start seeing clearly. You realize that most situations don't need your immediate input. Most conflicts resolve themselves when emotions cool down, and most people are not worth the emotional energy you were about to spend. The strongest people are not those who never feel anger or frustration. They are the ones who feel it and still choose calm. They allow emotions to pass without letting them control behavior. So the next time you feel triggered, remember this. Reactions create regrets, but pauses create power. Take a breath. Delay your response. Let the moment pass, because a few seconds of silence can save you years of regret. You lose power when you over-explain, and most people don't even realize when this is happening to them. Over-explaining usually doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of not being accepted. So we keep adding words, examples, justifications, and emotional details, hoping that if we say enough, the other person will finally understand us, agree with us, or approve of us. But the opposite happens. The more we explain, the more power we give away. When you over-explain, you hand control of the situation to the listener. You silently say, "Please validate me. Please believe me. Please accept my version of the story." And the moment your self-worth depends on someone else's agreement, your power weakens. Confidence doesn't beg to be understood. It stands calmly in truth. Think about people you respect. They don't give long explanations for every decision. They don't panic when questioned. They don't rush to clear every doubt. They state what they need to say, and they stop. That pause after speaking is not emptiness, it is authority. Over-explaining fills that pause with insecurity. Often, we over-explain because we feel guilty, even when we have done nothing wrong. We apologize too much. We justify simple boundaries. We explain why we need rest, space, or time, as if our needs require permission. In reality, people who respect you don't need long explanations, and people who don't respect you won't be convinced by them. Over-explaining also gives others more material to question, criticize, or manipulate. The more you say, the more angles you create for misunderstanding. A simple statement can be clear and strong. A long explanation can become confusing and weak. Words lose their sharpness when there are too many of them. There is also an emotional cost. When you over-explain, you relive the situation again and again. You reopen wounds. You justify pain. You exhaust yourself trying to be understood. And at the end, you still may not get the response you hoped for. That leaves you feeling drained and disappointed. In conversations, silence after clarity is powerful. It signals self-trust. It tells the other person, "I am comfortable with my decision." You don't need to convince everyone. You don't need to win everyone over. You don't need to defend your every move. Over-explaining is often learned behavior. Maybe in the past you were not heard. Maybe your feelings were dismissed. So you learn to speak more, explain more, prove more. But that survival strategy does not serve you anymore. You don't need to fight for understanding in every room. When you stop over-explaining, something interesting happens. People start listening more carefully. They sense your certainty. Even if they don't agree, they respect your composure. Calm clarity is far more persuasive than emotional justification. This doesn't mean you should never explain. Explanation has its place. But there is a difference between explaining to inform and explaining to defend. One comes from clarity, the other comes from insecurity. Learning to recognize that difference is a sign of emotional maturity. You are allowed to set boundaries without long reasons. You are allowed to say no without a speech. You are allowed to make choices that others don't understand. Your life does not require constant explanation. When you speak less but mean more, your words carry weight. When you trust yourself, you don't chase validation. And when you stop over-explaining, you stop shrinking yourself to fit into other people's expectations. Power is quiet. The confidence is concise. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is just enough, and then stop. People reveal more when you stay quiet. And this is one of the most underestimated advantages of silence. Most of us talk too much when we feel uncomfortable. Silence feels awkward, so we fill it with words. We explain, react, defend, joke, or argue just to avoid that uncomfortable pause. But that pause is powerful. When you don't rush to fill silence, you give others the space to show who they really are. When you stay quiet, people continue talking. And the longer they talk, the more truth slips out. Not because they intend to reveal it, but because silence removes resistance. Your quiet presence becomes a mirror. People hear themselves more clearly when no one interrupts them, corrects them, or reacts emotionally. They start expressing what they truly think, not just what they plan to say. Silence also removes performance. When you talk too much, conversations become a competition. Who is right? Who is smarter? Who has the better story? But when you stay quiet, the need to perform shifts to the other person. And in that shift, authenticity emerges. Pretenses weaken. Masks slip. Have you noticed how some people become uncomfortable around calm, quiet individuals? That discomfort is not because of silence itself. It's because silence demands self-awareness. When there is no reaction, no argument, no validation, people are left alone with their own words and emotions. And that can be confronting. Staying quiet also protects you. When you speak less, you reveal less about your insecurities, plans, and emotional triggers. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Silence gives you control over what you share and with whom. It keeps your boundaries intact without needing explanation. In conflicts, silence is especially revealing. When you stop reacting, the other person often escalates, exaggerates, or repeats themselves, and in that process, their real intention becomes clear. Are they seeking resolution, or are they seeking control? Are they expressing hurt, or are they feeding ego? Silence helps you observe rather than assume. Silence does not mean indifference. It means attentiveness. You are listening not just to words, but to tone, timing, and behavior. You start noticing inconsistencies. You see patterns. You understand people beyond what they claim to be. This is why wise listeners are often excellent judges of character. They don't rush to conclusions. They gather information patiently. They let people show their values through actions and repeated words, not through first impressions. In relationships, silence creates space for honesty. When one person is constantly talking, the other hides. But when one person listens calmly, the other feels safe enough to open up. Trust grows not through advice, but through presence. In professional environments, silence can be strategic. In meetings, those who speak less but observe more often understand the dynamics better than those who dominate the conversation. They see who influences decisions, who avoids responsibility, and who speaks without substance. When they finally speak, their insight is sharper because it is informed. There is also a personal transformation that happens when you embrace silence. You become less reactive. You stop needing constant validation. You become comfortable with pauses. That comfort is a sign of inner stability. You no longer feel the urge to prove yourself through words. Silence also filters relationships. Some people thrive only when there is drama and constant reaction. When you become quieter, those connections fade. And that's not a loss, that's clarity. The people who value depth, respect, and calm will stay. Staying quiet does not mean you never speak up. It means you choose when your words matter. You speak from understanding, not impulse. You respond with awareness, not emotion. So the next time you feel the urge to fill the silence, resist it. Let the pause breathe. Let people talk. Let them reveal themselves. Because when you stay quiet, you don't lose control, you gain insight. Peace is more valuable than being right. And this is one of the hardest lessons to accept, because being right feels good, but peace feels free. From a young age, we are trained to prove ourselves. In school, we are rewarded for correct answers. In conversations, we are praised for strong opinions. Slowly, we start believing that being right is equal to being worthy. So when someone disagrees with us, it doesn't feel like a difference of opinion, it feels like a personal attack. And that is where most unnecessary conflicts are born. The need to be right feeds the ego. It pushes us to argue longer than needed, explain harder than required, and defend positions that don't even matter in the long run. In the heat of the moment, we forget to ask a simple question: what will I gain if I win this argument? Very often, the answer is nothing except tension, distance, and exhaustion. Peace, on the other hand, doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It quietly improves your quality of life. When you choose peace, you protect your mental health, your emotional energy, and your relationships. You sleep better, you think clearer, you respond calmer, and none of these benefits come from being right. Many arguments are not about truth, they are about control. Both sides are busy defending their perspective, not understanding the other, and in such battles, even truth becomes a weapon. Words turn sharp, intentions turn ugly, and suddenly, the conversation is no longer about the issue, it is about winning. Choosing peace does not mean you are wrong. It means you are wise enough to see that not every disagreement deserves your emotional investment. Some people are not listening to understand, they are listening to reply. Arguing with them only drains you. There is also a deep maturity in letting go of the last word. The ego wants closure through dominance. Peace finds closure through acceptance. It understands that people are shaped by experiences you may never know. Their opinions are reflections of their journey, not attacks on your identity. In close relationships, the cost of being right is even higher. One harsh truth spoken without compassion can leave a wound that logic cannot heal. You may win the argument, but you lose warmth. You may prove your point, but you weaken trust. Over time, these small victories accumulate into emotional distance. Peace invites empathy. It allows you to say, I see your point, even when you don't fully agree. It allows space for different perspectives to coexist. And that space is where respect grows. Being right often requires repetition. You keep explaining, correcting, and defending. Peace requires acceptance. It says, I don't need to change your mind to be okay. That mindset is freeing. You stop carrying the burden of convincing others. In professional settings, those who constantly prove they are right often appear rigid. Those who value peace appear adaptable and composed. They know when to speak and when to let things go. Their confidence is not tied to validation. Peace also helps you conserve energy. Emotional energy is limited. Spending it on unnecessary arguments leaves little room for creativity, growth, and joy. When you stop fighting every battle, you have more strength for the things that truly matter. Letting go of being right is not easy. It challenges the ego. It requires humility. But humility is not weakness. It is clarity. It is knowing that your worth does not depend on winning debates. The most peaceful people are not those who are always right. They are those who know when it's not worth it. They choose harmony over tension, understanding over ego, and calm over chaos. So the next time you feel the urge to prove a point, pause. Ask yourself, is this about truth or is this about ego? Is this worth disturbing my peace? Because at the end of the day, being right may satisfy the mind, but peace heals the soul.